Hello, my name is Reggie Chapman. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Director of Policy at the Fortune Society's David Rothenberg Center for Public Policy. Welcome to Both Sides of the Bars, which is a discussion-driven show that examines the criminal legal system from various perspectives, including people impacted by the system. Here we discuss critical questions about how the criminal legal system works, its intersections with social justice, and the efforts that advocates are making to improve the lives of everyone affected. We ask that you, the viewers, spread the words about Both Sides of the Bars and share your comments with us on Twitter, also known as X, at the Fortune SOC. Today's show is titled College in Prison and Increased Civic Engagement After Incarceration. In today's show, we would like to examine how providing incarcerated people with a college education has equipped them with the critical thinking skills and political awareness that has increased their civic engagement post-incarceration. Furthermore, considering that Black and Brown people are disproportionately represented within the prison population and thereby college prison programs, how providing them with higher education can position them to advocate for policy change that benefits their communities. This episode features two guests who have an in-depth understanding of this phenomenon. First, we have Dr. Robert Tynes, who is the Director of College and Prison Operations at the renowned Bar Prison Initiative. We also have Tammar Cancer, who is a formerly incarcerated person who earned his bachelor's degree in political science from the Bar Prison Initiative. He is also the Director of Special Projects at the Center for Community Alternatives. Good afternoon, Dr. Tynes and Tammar.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Right. And so before we get started, I'd just like to say to you, Dr. Tynes, as a former professor of mine, and Tammar as a classmate and colleague, I'm honored to have you both here on both sides of the bars to discuss this issue. It means a great deal to me. It also means a great deal to the Fortune Society. I just want to say that to you guys before we begin. And so with that being said, without any further ado, we can actually begin. And my first question is going to be for you, Dr. Tynes. We know that you've conducted a study actually on college education in prison and civic engagement post-incarceration. And so my first question for you is that, why did you choose to conduct the study in the first place?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Reggie, for having me on. And I would say, the whole idea of civic and social engagement, both of you exemplify exactly what this study was curious about because of your deep involvement in kind of social and civic engagement right now, post-incarceration. I mean, it's great. So if I had to stop now, I'd just say, we'll talk to you two. But the study that we did, and it was a group of us composed of 4 BARD alum, formerly incarcerated students who really wanted to help explore this idea, as well as Matt Denny, a colleague from Yale and Johns Hopkins. We were interested in, Matt and I did a study a while back on college and prison and recidivism, which is kind of one of the kind of classic gauges out there that policymakers like to look at as far as college and prison. And we're not really thinking that education is about reducing recidivism, but it is something that we had to deal with. And so our study found, of course, that college and prison drastically reduces recidivism rates. And so, we kind of tabled that one and said, look, we've proved this, but we're not really concerned with that. We're interested in why, like what is happening. We know that college and prison certainly helps with social and political mobility once someone's released. We know that it helps with employment. But we were really more interested in like the why of it, which is kind of the network and the social impact of it. And so we designed a study, the 6 of us, where we were looking at kind of the classic political science rubric of voting habits. That's the normal like political science civic engagement metric. But then we did some qualitative work using surveys and interviews. And what we found, of course, is that happily that it definitely increases the likelihood that someone will vote, even though they face multiple barriers just being incarcerated, and even before that in their community, as far as kind of the way society is geared at this point, as far as excluding people. So this was the realm that we wanted to explore, and more importantly, it's really not about college and prison. It's a long-standing discussion in higher education as far as the effects of higher education and civic and social engagement, and how important it is for democracy in general. So, like, part of this is we wanted to say, hey, look, we're not really concerned with prison and college. We're in those two parts, we're concerned college, right? We just happen to have a college in an environment where the obstacles to things like voting, right, citizenship, and just kind of psychologically the obstacles to what a prison does, puts the obstacles before anyone who's incarcerated. We thought, well, here's a great test, right? If higher education can have an effect on this social group that faces more obstacles than anybody out there in American society, as far as civic and social engagement, then we've really found something. And as I kind of led with it, I said, that's exactly what we found, is that, it changes voting habits. You're more likely to vote if you went through a college and prison program. And then further than that, we did surveys. We wanted to find out kind of the why. And we always say it increases critical thinking, it increases critical engagement. But that was actually the feedback that we received from former students, that, it gave people a sense of purpose that they actually did not know was out there. It also connected them to groups of other like-minded people, which was really important. So that's what we found so far. And again, this is a preliminary study that we haven't published it yet because we're kind of fine-tuning and looking at other things, the effects of race and gender and age on this as well.
Yeah. So you said a lot there, and I want to unpack it, and I appreciate you for explaining that to our viewers. You mentioned that this wasn't so much about prison, but it was really about education and civic engagement. And while that may be true, I just want to say too, but there is association with like a lack of education and incarceration rates, particularly amongst the demographic that a person like myself and Tammar comes from. And so I'm one of your former students, and this is very dear to me because the education that I received as part of the BPI program really primed me politically, and it allowed me to develop my critical thinking skills, so that when I did re-enter society, I understood the power of that and how I could kind of change my conditions when I came home, or at least play a role in doing so. And it also, like you mentioned earlier, recidivism, like this, the notion of being politically engaged in your community or in the environment which you exist, I think that it decreases the likelihood that you're going to engage in, like, I want to say, for lack of a better term, adverse behaviors that negatively impact your community. So I think that, like, even having that understanding that, okay, I'm vested in this community, this is my community, I have power in this space, I'm part of the collective, and you know what, I can do things. So it's like the inverse function that, I'm not going to engage in that stuff anymore. How about I engage in more empowering of things, So I appreciate your analysis, and I just want to provide that for the viewers because, again, I'm a former BPI student. I'm one of your students. In fact, my first political education kind of came from your classes. Tammar and I were in there, and there's one thing Tammar will always say to me: "Listen, Benjamin, you gotta get a political education up. That's where power is at." And so, when I was released, although I went on to, get a degree in public health, that still is driven through that lens of having a political education. I just want to say that, and so appreciate that. And I want to ask Tammar a question, considering everything I just said about, education, prison, and you also mentioned like some variables about race and age. And so that kind of like allows me to transition to a question I would like to propose to Tammar. So Tammar, my question for you is that how has your academic journey shaped your understanding of civic engagement in respect to activity within the Black and Brown community?
I think probably in a couple of ways. I'll just rattle off a couple of ways. I think for one, the college education. So I knew something was wrong because I was in the situation that I was in. I think the college education gave me the conceptual framework to really, and the vocabulary to actually articulate, what was going on, what's happening politically in the place that I came from, in the place that I am in. Um, you know, like, I think about the term or the idea of the state has the monopoly on the legitimate use of force, right? Before I ever heard of that, right? I'm seeing things totally different now when I see a police shooting or anything of that nature, right? When I look at international news or whatever, I'm looking through that framework now. I'm able to articulate, what does it mean to have a monopoly on legitimate use of violence, right? By the state. So I think it gave me a vocabulary, it gave me concepts, you know, and I don't know if it would make me a better analysis or politician or anything, but I'm able to speak. I can hear somebody talking and I can identify that's real Hobsonian, or that's very neoliberal or something like that. So it's about the college education gave me a lens that I think enabled me to uncrack a lot of the political forces that were going on in my neighborhood, my community, Black people communities in general. It helped me identify it more precisely, I guess.
Thank you for offering that unpacking tomorrow. And you said something. You said a lot in there, but one thing you said that two. It was a number of things you said that kind of sparked a lot of thoughts in my mind. But two things you talked about this idea of like the state and the monopoly on power and the legitimate use of force. And I thought about that, and I also thought about something that Dr. Tynes said when he just spoke a few minutes ago, and we talked about like our community understanding what's happening in power, right? I can recall probably one of the most profound moments in my education ever. I don't know if you were in this class, but we were discussing political theory and the state, the idea of the state. And one question that Dr. Tynes posed to us, like, guys were incarcerated, but just speaking about our positionality, being in that class, having access to this type of education. And then someone actually, spoke about why they were even here. And, another classmate said, okay, well, I'm here because I committed X, Y, and Z crime. And then the question became around like, why are you in prison? And obviously, in addition to that particular thing a person may or may have not done, but it was based on this concept. In addition to that, like you're here because you value the state. And I just brought that up just to say that, like, when I think about this idea of community and the motivation behind thinking outside of myself and my immediate environment and people I may have harmed and not harmed, understanding that like I have a responsibility as a person, as a resident, as a citizen. And so when I do things, I do them against the entire community and vice versa. So think about that power I had or can have, that motivated me. And I think it motivated you also as well to like become politically active in that community, just understanding that we value that type of power. Just want to say offer that commentary. And that's very powerful. And with that being said, I like to kind of transition back to Dr. Tynes, particularly about his study. And I just want to know, Dr. Tynes, what were some of your key findings, particularly in respect to its impact on Black and Brown communities? I think we have some technical difficulties with Dr. Tynes and his internet, but if we can't work it out, I guess I'll transition back to Tammar. So Tammar, just building on the question I proposed to you previously, how do you use your understanding to drive change in your community post-incarceration based on your educational experience?
I think one of the things that I'm big on doing is actually getting people to understand the arena or the political environment that we're actually operating in. Oftentimes, especially our colleagues who are re-entering society, they have all these plans in their mind. You know, they want to do this, they want to do that, and oftentimes I ask them, I say, yo, hold on, I know you have all these plans, but do you fully comprehend? Like, I got a group of guys I'm going out to tomorrow. In the last few weeks, all I've been asking them, do you guys really grasp the current political environment that we're operating in? You know what I mean? And with me, I want people to reach their own conclusions based off just providing them with the information. So I provide them with the information. What does it mean when the Consumer Bureau of Protection is gutted by the Trump administration, right? How does that affect you? You know what I mean? With me, it's about getting the person to do the thinking for themselves, because we're all in our own individual, we're in our own situations. But I like to, you know, challenge them, push them, just like we were being pushed in class. Like, think about this. And if you don't have any idea about it, use the technology and learn about it. Question the AI. Like, really position yourself, really grasp like what position you are in, because I think we're you know, I really want them to understand that, you know, the political climate right now that you're operating in, you need to balance all that out and compare it to your plans, what you're planning to do. I mean, yeah, to navigate the environment, you just have to be aware of the political circumstances of the moment right now.
Great. Thank you for providing that, Tammar. That's an excellent perspective. You definitely offered some powerful insights. You spoke about like getting people that you speak about in your community to understand the political climate when they want to engage in something. Could you provide us? Because I know you're actually either had a special projects in your working capacity. Like, can you tell us about some of the things that you're currently doing in Black and Brown communities in respect to political education, political activity, etc.?
One of the things that I do is I lobby New York State legislature. I lobby. One of the things that I lobby for is funding for housing, right? Housing for people coming back to society. The group that I'm facilitating tomorrow night is in our housing program, Freedom Commons, in Syracuse, right? The academy portion of that housing program holds about 15 gentlemen who were currently released from incarceration. I'm just basically trying to bring them up to speed with, you know, telling them, you know, don't feel overwhelmed, because, you know, I know it's a lot to take in, but at the same time, just breaking off, you know, little things for them to actually exercise and grasp, you know, their current situation, their current predicament. So this past election, bro, one thing the past election just told me was how ill-informed, or maybe I don't want to say uneducated, but people did not know how the system worked, bro. And if they did, I don't know. I can't understand why, right? What would make people like blatantly vote against their own interests? So that was something that I'm constantly wrestling with. And for the guys that I deal with in the community, especially, like, I really want you to be informed on the decisions that you make. Don't believe it because I'm telling you, you know what I mean? Research it. We live in an information age. These cell phones, I'm fascinated by the technology. The cell phones, they it's encyclopedias, volumes of information at your fingertips, right? Tap into it, learn, you know, research. People running for mayor, people running for city council, people running from your state reps. Learn these people, research them. How do they vote? Why do you like, if you do like this candidate, why? You know what I mean? How do your interest in his campaign speak to your interests?
So just speaking of that, speaking about like the individuals that you're engaging with this housing and trying to get them upscale their political acumen. Do you think, my question for you is that, like, you're obviously a graduate of the BPI program, and we're talking about like you've actually ascertained your political education in the college prison program. And so I know that there are various BPI graduates. Do you notice a difference between yourself and other BPI graduates as it pertains to their political acumen and activity, as opposed to a person who didn't receive, who was incarcerated but did not receive a college education while incarcerated?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I
Can
don't
you
think
explain?
that. I don't think that. I mean, I know people who are politically savvy and educated who didn't go to the bar college program. However, I do notice that for those of us who did go, when it comes to communication, whether it's written communication or oral communication, sometimes, I mean, like I said, we just have an ability to articulate these political concepts. You know what I mean? We can identify certain arguments, and it's that structure that comes with like the formal academic experience. I definitely notice a difference in us just being able to jump in the ring and just articulate what it is that um, whatever topic we're pursuing. We just have an ability to grasp it, um, ring it out, whatever we need. There's definitely a difference between my colleagues who got college education in prison and the ones who didn't.
Okay, so how do you see that? Like, how do you see those impacts on the ground? So you mentioned that there's a difference in the ability to articulate oneself,
Right.
as it
Look,
pertains to a
look.
person who was in prison who didn't receive a college education, who did. And my question for you is that, like, considering everything you just spoke about, like, how do you see that change? How do you see that impacting? My question is, how do you see that impacting these Black and Brown communities on the ground? What do we
Oh,
need to do to continue to do that? And like,
yeah.
how
Look
do we
at
get
look
others on
just
board?
just just look at wherever we're located in the spaces that we're located, especially in like social justice movements, right? Um, we're big in the social justice community. Normally, when you see us in the social justice spaces, whether it's at Fortune Network or Osborne, CCA, wherever, oftentimes like we're heading projects. We're out shaking. You know, um, we're forces in nature out here, bro. In your community, in our community, in my community, I am like a go-to. I'm a go-to person. So, and I notice, oftentimes, my friends would say, well, you and your friends are kind of different from the other fellas that frequent the establishment. And 9 times out of 10, the difference is all of my colleagues, we were all like BPI graduates. Not the tote
Mm.
BPI's horn, but that's who's around me, right? And this work that I do, those are the people who are around me in this work that I do, these are the people who I witnessed their acts. I witnessed your work, the work that you do out. Alor, all of us, Maxis, all of us are forces in nature in whatever arena where we are located. I mean, I don't think that's
Fair enough.
coincidental. I don't think that's
So we
coincidental.
had Right, we had Dr. Tynes back. I sorry, apologize for your technical difficulties, Dr. Tynes,
No.
but we're just talking about a kind of like very, very like interesting dynamic in the conversation, which kind of leads me to one of the questions I want to ask you, one of our final questions. Dr. Tynes, how do you think that providing incarcerated individuals with access to higher education can reshape the broader political and social landscape in terms of pushing for policy changes that better serve marginalized communities? If you could answer that.
I mean, first of all, you're trusted. You become trusted public intellectuals in your community, which means that you not only do people trust you on the ground, but you understand how to translate those needs to policymakers that may not be in your communities, right? So they may be in Albany, in the state house, or they may be in DC in the federal government, and you become the ones who translate on the ground needs into policy. You know what kind of policy. When you hear a policy that's just like totally misses it, like, no, that's not it. if you do that, this is going to displace more people, or this is going to create greater problems in one way or another. So I think for Black and brown communities, like, this is how you get a voice in policy making. The other thing that was important is that, you know, this is how you maintain democracy. As we all can see right now, democracy is not something you just kind of make and then stick in a closet and just it does its own thing. It's constantly being challenged, right? And the first
Yes.
places that it's wiped out are in the Black and brown communities. And so there becomes lack of kind of will. You know, you can get kind of an intentional lethargia of like, it doesn't matter, what I say doesn't matter. But if you have public intellectuals such as you and Tammar in the communities, you can say, actually, it really does matter. It does matter if you vote. It does matter if your kids are engaged. This is how we change it, because they're not, policymakers aren't going to change it unless we help them figure it out.
All right. Thank you. That's brilliant, Dr. Tynes. I appreciate that. And we share your sentiments. And that's probably one of the most, I would say, important pieces of information that we've been able to gather during the discussion. Unfortunately, we're up against time. And so we have to conclude this interview. But before we do, I just want to say that thank you to our guests. Thank you to you two, Dr. Tynes and Tammar, for sharing your wisdom and experiences. Thank you to our viewers for joining us for a thought-provoking discussion. On behalf of the Fortune Society, we thank you so much for tuning in to Both Sides of the Bars. If you're interested in finding out more about us on the Fortune Society, please check us out on our website. That's fortunesociety.org. That's fortunesociety.org, or on Facebook. This is Reggie Chapman, and I appreciate you for joining us for a critical discussion on both sides of the bars. Thank you.